Hello and welcome to Self-Publishing 101 with your Professor Francesca McMahon, which is, no, I can't do it like that. I can't take that too seriously because that was also ridiculous, but also just not very funny. But yes, so you may have seen on my community page that I have had the opportunity recently to give some lectures on self-publishing to students, which was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing that, and it actually helped towards the fact that I do want to become a professor in future. So I thought, what better opportunity to force onto my subscribers my lecture on self-publishing. So here I am today to talk about self-publishing and what it can offer. So let's dive in. So first of all, here is just a little overview of what self-publishing is. So self-publishing is as the title goes, basically, fully self-funded publishing of books, short stories, novellas, various different things in general in written format. And self-funded is your own finances going towards the publication of the work, so paying for editors, paying for the publication process, for marketing, etc. Though you can also use things like Kickstarter to help others fund your publishing process. Though it doesn't always work for people who are first-time authors, though if you have a previous establishment as a writer, Kickstarter can work in general. Though even if you don't, sometimes it's just worth giving it a shot. You never know who will gain interest in your work from your Kickstarter page. But yes, it is money that you have raised to go towards funding your book, short story, etc., instead of in traditional publishing where it comes from the publisher themselves and they pay you to write a book and then you get a percentage of royalties afterwards. So it's just your money, a bit of risk, and hopefully some good payout. Now, when it comes to making the choice for self-publishing, there is a lot of evidence of people making said choice. For example, there are authors who are now traditionally published who actually originally started off as self-published authors, like Evan Winters for The Rage of Dragons and Andy Weir for The Martian, which obviously then became a movie as well. And I mean, their self-published books became so popular that they ended up being approached by traditional publishers to have that work published traditionally. And that does happen quite a bit for self-published authors. They gain traction. I mean, Eragon is also another example, a previously self-published work that went on to be traditionally published as well, and the author now continuing to gain acclaim. Of course, there are also authors who are self-published who gain acclaim and decide to stay self-published, like M.L. Wang for The Sword of Kaigen. Now, I do believe M.L. Wang has had some special editions done by publishers, but from what I'm aware, it has predominantly led to her work staying self-published for future projects. And it is through staying self-published and also just self-publishing as a whole that has led to a lot of people finding interest in going down that path, whether it be through things like Kickstarter, Draft2Digital, KDP, Ingram Spark, whatever platform you end up using. Self-publishing has become a lot more accessible for writers and authors in general in comparison to the traditional market, though of course the traditional market is going to continue to be the most chosen choice because there is a lot of risk that comes with self-publishing. But instead of talking about the risks right now, let's talk about the benefits that come with self-publishing. Control of the process. Now, if you know anyone who's creative, you know more often than not we are a little bit of a control freak. We like having things be perfect to a degree. We like knowing when things are going to be done. We often have a strict schedule. Not everyone, because again, not everyone is the same, but at least a lot of the writers I know, everything needs to be to a schedule of sort. Sometimes that schedule changes and then we have a panic attack, but then, sometimes that just happens. But yes, control of the process is definitely something that a lot of people who choose self-publishing find to be appealing because it means not only are you having the choice of and the decision making behind how long you're going to write the book for, how many revisions you're going to go through, how many beta readers you're going to have, whether or not you're going to have an editor, a proofread, and maybe a sensitivity reader as well, when they're going to come in, when you're going to publish, how many books you're going to publish, etc., etc. All of that is within your own control, which is not always the case within traditional publishing, which is why a lot of people which is why some people go this self-publishing route. Writing what you are interested in is also another reason why some people go the self-publishing route. Now, of course, you can write what you are interested in and write stories that appeal to you and go for an agent or go to be traditionally published. But depending on what kind of story you are writing, there is not always the chance the book will be picked up. Take my case, for example. Home to the Wild and Way of the Wild are sapphic Tarzan and coming-of-age wolf child stories. And while there was the chance that this could have been picked up by a traditional publisher, because it is kind of niche in its storytelling of sapphic Tarzan sort of vibes, I wasn't 100% sure if it would ever be picked up by an agent, and if it did, whether or not it would be something that would go on to sell. Because of the fact that, Tarzan, people love the animated movie, but it's not exactly a big fairy tale or general story that a lot of people think about and would want a retelling of. So I didn't think it's something that would sell, but I wanted it out there. So I self-published it. And a lot of people go down this direction as well, of not knowing whether or not a traditional publisher would take interest in the specific subject and story they are trying to tell, especially in terms of marginalized identities within writing. Though, of course, there is a lot of stuff coming out with traditional publishing now, it's still definitely a little bit more difficult for being, for example, in my case, a queer author, to be picked up and have their work get out there. Not to say that traditional publishing is not working towards fixing that, but traditional publishing is also still predominantly white, cis, and male. Again, not slamming on that, but it does make it a little bit more difficult to break through when you have a marginalized identity. Whereas in self-publishing, whilst it is still difficult to break through in terms of, viewership and people noticing your work, you kind of have almost a guarantee that your work is going to be published because you are the one publishing it. Whether it's going to be quality or not is up to you. Now, this is the thing that a lot of people will definitely take more interest in because, unfortunately, we live in a capitalist society and money does make the world go round. And so the fact that all the royalties go to you is something that is of benefit also. Because unlike in traditional publishing, percentages go to the publisher, to your agent if you have one, and then eventually trickle down to you. For example, for an idea of kind of how sometimes these can not work in an author's favour, because I don't want to talk about that because I don't have the experience myself, you can check out Zyra and Jay Zhao's channel. I believe they talked about it here on YouTube as well, but if they didn't, they definitely talked about it on their Instagram. I will link it down below. Basically about the fact that the advances that they got and then eventually the royalty payments that came through did not cover enough for them to live, even though they were a New York Times best-selling author for their first novel. And that is the risk of the percentages. Though again, the risk is also with self-publishing is if you don't sell, you aren't making the money. But when you do sell, all the royalties are going to you, except for the very small percentages that come off for print and distribution from the companies such as Kindle Direct Publishing, which is with Amazon, Ingram Spark, which is a global company that sends your books out into bookstores and are available to be ordered on bookstores, Draft to Digital as well, which is an ebook network, various different things, but they do take a percentage of the money for basically hosting your book. But in comparison to traditional publishing, from what I have heard, again, I've not got the biggest insight into that, so any traditionally published authors, if you're allowed to, let me know percentages that you usually receive. As far as I'm aware, in self-publishing, the percentages for these print-on-demand and hosting sites are a lot smaller than what publishers and then agents take, leaving the author with whatever percentage they usually get, which is why self-publishing is sometimes a little bit more enticing in terms of these royalty splits and percentages, if you sell, of course. Which is when we go into the risks of self-publishing and the reality check of it all, because self-publishing sounds really cool, really good. There's hardly any negatives, it sounds like, but unfortunately there are a lot of negatives that comes with self-publishing. For one, the being reliant on your own finances. Now, self-publishing is something I class as a very privileged way of publishing, because you have to have money to be able to self-publish. If you do not have money for marketing, for editing, for cover costs, for all these different things, you are going to struggle to get, firstly, a good product out, but also to get the product out and also sustain yourself. More often than not, you can sometimes be putting down about £2,000 to £3,000 for just one book, for a novel at least. Sometimes it can be smaller for short stories and novellas, but for novels, it can be upwards of £2,000 to £3,000 for that one book, which is mad when you say it out loud. There are possibilities of bringing it down. I know, for example, Brittany Atasada, who is here on YouTube, has worked towards having her costs being less as time has gone on, because she has gained more understanding of her publishing process, of her skills and abilities. But when you're starting out and you want to make sure that the product you are getting out is as good as can be, sometimes you have to spend more money to make sure that you are getting as good of a project out as possible. And in my case, that is pretty much what I did, which means that I know I'm in a privileged position of being able to have that money, because for one, I had a really good paying job. I'm not with that job anymore, but I saved basically all of the money that I have from that, and have for the last 2 years now been working full-time with writing, which is an incredibly privileged position to be in. I live at home, I don't pay rent, I sometimes pay for the groceries and stuff like that, because of the fact that my parents are incredibly supportive of my writing goal. I am about to go back to do my master's at university to hopefully go on to become a university lecturer in creative writing. But again, at current, I am earning no money besides doing some odd jobs here and there and getting some financial royalties coming in from my books. Bar that, it is my savings, and I had quite a bit in savings to be able to do this, which puts me in a very privileged position in comparison to others. So self-publishing can't always be for everyone, because not everyone is in that financial position of privilege to be able to do so, which means, just like traditional publishing, which has its own classist-based aspects, self-publishing is also just as a classist position as traditional. Though you can try and find ways to not spend as much money, you've got to really have built a network up to do so, which, I mean, admittedly is not a difficult thing to do, it just takes time. I just wanted to put that out there because I'm very much aware of the privilege that I have of being able to do this full time whilst not actually making that much money to do so. So I just wanted to put that there because that is, I mean, I know the position I'm in and I have to be upfront about that. There's also the fact that alongside it being reliant on your own finances and the position that you have, etc., etc., you have to also be almost fully reliant on your own abilities as both a writer, a marketer, and a publisher. If you are not skilled at all three of those things, you are not going to sell. It doesn't matter how good of a writer you are, how good of a story, like you could be like Tolkien level or Ursula K. Le Guin level storyteller. It will not matter if you cannot market and if you did not know how to publish correctly. Marketing is basically the biggest thing here as well. And I'll talk a little bit later about how I screwed up royally when it came to actually marketing my first book and why that has badly affected my process now. But for now, yeah, if you're not good at those three things, you are not going to succeed. There are cases of those who've had the overnight success of basically barely doing anything and being able to get the success from it, but those are rare cases. Not everyone is going to be a best-selling author for their first book. It's just not possible. Well, yeah, it's not possible for everyone. It does happen, but it is very, very rare and very, very uncommon. Which is why, just like in traditional publishing, it can take years until not only do you break through into the market and get recognized by audiences and get acclaim and just basically be noticed. For the self-publishing side as well, it can also take years until you break even. I literally just today, before filming this, did my financial breakdowns of how much money I have made in these 2 years of publishing, and I cried. Just a little one of just kind of like, oh my God, what have I done? But that is the reality of it all. I'm 2 years in, I've published what's going to be 2 novels, 3 short stories, and I've been in an anthology, and I've barely made any money back from the amount that I spent. But that is just the reality for self-publishing. And even in traditional publishing in terms of getting notice, it will take years until anyone is aware of your work. For traditional publishing, it can take up to your 5th book for people to even know that you are publishing. In self-publishing, it can be up to 5 to 10 books before people recognize and you have a name for yourself. It takes a lot of grinding, it takes a lot of hard work, it takes a lot of building of knowledge and your network to even have the chance of getting recognized and, like I said, for self-publishing, breaking even for the amount of money that you have spent. Which is why some people do continue to stick with traditional publishing, because unlike in self-publishing, they are providing you money to write and you are actually making something without having to spend any of your own money. So there is no need to break even because you are already doing so by the fact that you are being paid to do it. Self-publishing has a lot of upfront costs and very, very slow follow through on those costs. Traditional publishing, you get advance payments. Like I said, you get paid to write a book if it sells. If your agent gets it to a publisher and they're like, hey, we like this, here is money to improve it, get it finished, get it edited, blah, 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 we'll then publish it. So you are getting the money upfront as well. Self-publishing, you are spending and spending and spending until the book goes out. You spend a little bit more for marketing and then hope for all against all odds that people will recognize it and you will get some acclaim. Not even acclaim, just that you'll try and break even and just make back the money that you spent, which can take years. A friend of mine has talked about the fact that they've been publishing for 6 years now, I think, and they've only just made back all of their money on like a few of their books. So not even all of the books that they've made and published. They've just made back the money on some of them. That's terrifying to think about, but that is the reality of it. And obviously I'm going to give this information so you are aware of basically everything that goes on in self-publishing. So after hearing all this, you may be thinking, okay, so why self-publishing? What about it is so appealing to people? Why are so many people more doing it, and why have I done it? Well, in comparison to traditional publishing, self-publishing is a lot more accessible. Obviously, there's still the class-based thing of like you do need to have the money to do it, but in comparison to traditional publishing, you at least know that something is going to come from it. You are still going to have something that you can show people at the end of the day. Traditional publishing has become a little bit more less accessible as the years have gone by, with things like DV Pit moving away from Twitter and onto Discord, which I still need to try and see if I can find where the Discord for that is. But DV Pit and things like Pitch Wars were basically online social media based pitching events to be able to give information about the book that you've written, at least the rough drafts of it or the recently revised drafts of it, and have an agent give interest. And it has worked, but they have become a little less frequent. They have not always led to follow through from what I've heard. I do know people who have gained agents, but even after gaining an agent, it doesn't necessarily mean you will be published. There are friends that I have who've been with their agent for 3 or 4 years and nothing has ever come of having an agent. They've had books that have written that have never been sold, so they have to write something new and try and get that sold as well. It is a very, very long process and it can get tedious and tiresome. And if you've seen some of the news to do with publishing in general, there is also the fact that the workers within publishing themselves are exhausted and overworked, which means that there is not as much attention that then goes towards the authors because, quite rightly, the agents, editors, etc. within publishing deserve to be being treated properly, paid fairly, all these sort of things, hence strikes with like HarperCollins, for example, and various other different companies. Because they're overworked, they deserve more money. Pay them properly. But because of that, it can lead to agents having like 50 plus authors to their name, or even 100 plus authors to their name, that they all have to manage and try to manage equally, which, if you've ever had to handle the workload of having 100 people or 50 people under your belt, it is a very stressful process to have. Like I said, I used to do this in academic publishing, and academic publishing is nothing remotely similar to like fiction-based publishing. I had maybe similar numbers, but definitely not the same level of workload, because academics are very, very slow people. I say it's like I do want to become an academic in terms of teaching, but like academics are slow. Respect for what you do, but also slow. And so it can lead to this long process of eventually getting published, if even getting published at all. There are people who moved on to new agents. There are people who have just dropped agents altogether because nothing has come from that relationship. And it's on both sides. It's the fact that they are overworked, underpaid, the fact that traditional publishing is there's just a lot of it happening, and also the fact that these authors are just working so hard without having much follow through, which, in comparison to self-publishing, where you do the work and you yourself as the publisher get it out into the world. Which is why, with the accessibility and control aspects of self-publishing, a lot more authors are now moving towards self-publishing, or at least hybrid related publishing, where some things are traditionally published and some things are self-published or indie published. It's becoming a little bit more popular in recent years because of the previously mentioned issues within traditional publishing. And as someone who's worked in publishing, there's a lot of issues to be fixed. I just have no idea what it's like in fiction-based traditional publishing, and I dread to ask my friends who do work in that field. But let's talk about the success stories related to self-publishing and why it's led to people becoming a bit more interested in the market, as well as the fact that there is now a lot less judgment in relation to self-published authors. Now, we have authors who have had successes on all levels. So there are people who've ended up on bestsellers lists like Lyra Parrish, Kennedy Fox, Jessica Cage. There are various different authors within the self-publishing sphere who've ended up on these lists, as well as the fact that self-published authors, like traditional authors these days, but more so really, know how to market themselves. There is a lot of indie authors on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram who provide content on a regular basis too, giving information to people who want to be writers and authors, providing insights to their writing processes, creating really fun TikToks about their books and their writing processes. And just, if you are, let's say, 18 plus, check out Jessica Cage on TikTok and Instagram as well, because I believe she posts on both about what she does. But the videos that she does are just, they're very fun. And I think that's a thing that a lot of self-published authors are really good at. Of like, they just make engaging content, and on a regular basis, because like I was saying earlier, marketing is a huge thing for self-publishing. If you don't know how to do it, you aren't going to get noticed. So we find ways to be innovative with our marketing. I definitely need to improve with my marketing, and I will be using a lot of Jessica Cage, Bethany Azida's, I apologize if I'm saying her name wrong, by the way, Sarah Sutton, Antoine Bandelay, various different people's abilities to market their work, because they are so good at it, and I'm really bad at it. But it's these things like using social media to their advantage, getting on bestseller lists because of their skill and the marketing that they have to get their work out there, that it gets popular enough to be on bestseller lists. I mean, most people wouldn't think previously at least, most people wouldn't think self-published books would be worth being on bestseller lists, because they were looked down on so much in almost the same sphere of like how people look down on fan fiction. A lot of people treated self-publishing as if it were fan fiction, with derision. But now there is so much improvement in the field. So many authors are working so incredibly hard to make their project and product as best as it can be, and it's working. I mean, we also have authors who are now getting adaptations of their work. For example, Legally Blonde, based on a book, and a self-published book at that. Before, Before the film, well, basically, the film is based on a self-published book. Legally Blonde was originally a self-published novel that became a film, and then, similar to like Andy Weir, was then traditionally published as a book as well. I will admit I wasn't the biggest fan of the book. I think the film was better. Sometimes that does happen. But anyway, yeah, I didn't know that. Legally Blonde originally self-published. Very interesting. But also, T.J. Young and the Orishas by Antoine Baddeley, who is here on YouTube as well, by the way. It is also getting an adaptation, and only 2 of this 5-book series are actually out, and it's already gotten an adaptation request. But yeah, an adaptation for a self-published series. Self-published books are being taken more seriously, and more success is going towards self-published authors, similar to the success that you see with traditionally published authors as well. It's impressive. It's showing that things have changed with the way in which people thought about self-publishing, and the fact that self-published authors have always been just as good as traditionally published authors. There are just now more attention to us than there was before. And yeah, while there are still risks of things going wrong, like not making your money back, not getting any attention, kind of failing to hit the market to a degree, and various different things like that, there is still the success that is there. And unfortunately, there will always be a bit of stigma about it, like the fact that I will need to be traditionally published if I want to be taken seriously as a creative writing professor. But the stigma is slowly being removed, and hopefully that means that whenever those who are watching this go on to self-publish, if that is what you wish to do, the market and the atmosphere will be so much different for all of you, because these authors and various other more authors within the self-published sphere have paved the way for, self-published authors to be respected. But let's talk about the disrespect of it all, because I am now going to break down all the things I did wrong when it came to the publication of my first novel, and basically let you all know what not to do when it does come to self-publishing your work. First things first, I did not market, or at least I did not market in the way that I should have. Like I've been saying kind of a little bit throughout, marketing is literally the thing that makes or breaks your ability to be a successful published author, or at least one that gains some attention when you've published your first book. And I did not do it at all. I did some marketing here and there. Some of you may have seen the short videos that I did here on YouTube, on Instagram, TikTok, just a few random videos here and there, just being like, hey, my book's coming out. But that is not good marketing. I did not do any targeted ads. I did not explain the storyline for the book. I did not reach out to reviewers, which is probably the biggest mistake that I made, which I'm rectifying for the sequel, Way of the Wild. Because if you do not have reviews, okay, let's just give an example. When you go to Amazon, for example, if you see a product that has no reviews, will you buy it? More often than not, the answer will be no, because the fact that it has no reviews is not usually a good sign. And the fact that I did not reach out to reviewers, the fact that I did not have any reviews on Goodreads, any reviews on Amazon, except for like a few random ones that were like family members more often than not, I did not have the attention that firstly Amazon would give to people, because if you don't have reviews, Amazon is not going to boost you. I did not have the attention from the fact that this book was published, and I did not have the audience that I needed, because I did not tell people what this book was properly about. I just gave basic buzzword ideas that vaguely connected to the book. I technically didn't even have a proper tagline at the time. I do now, but it's like a year too late because the book came out last year. I did have it like a couple of months later after the release, but still I should have had that sorted out way beforehand of, this is Call of the Wild meets Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron, or this is a coming of age Tarzan story. This is a coming of age found family story. Like, I needed things like that, but I didn't. And so my marketing was random. It was funny videos that, yeah, could help towards sales. But if I'm not providing information on the content, people don't know what they're going to be buying, which means they are not going to buy. Which is the fact that when you don't know your audience, which in my case, I also did not know who my audience specifically were, I was saying things of just like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like middle grade, maybe a little bit young adults. It's kind of an adventure. Like, it was always a kind of something. I was never specific with the information that I was giving, which then led to people who may have children that they were like, I don't know if this is something I can give to my child because you've not specified whether or not this is an appropriate book for preteens, for example, because you've not given enough information about the story itself or who it would be appropriate for. And that leads into the marketing-based problems, the reviewer-based problems, and so on and so forth. Because if I don't have this information, no one will want to buy it because they don't have the information they need as to whether or not they want to spend their money on this product. And the other thing that you may all have seen if you are here on my YouTube or even following me on social media is never believe your project or product is finished until you have double checked everything. I pressed publish when the manuscript was wrong, which meant I had less than 6 hours to get the product fixed with the correct manuscript. Otherwise, the wrong thing would have gone out to every single person, and I would not have been able to fix it until release day, which also means the people who had pre-ordered, especially the ebook, would have gotten the wrong book and probably would not have even gotten the updated one because I did not know how to do that. So, in a panic attack, with my parents also coming back from their holiday, which was a 4-5 hour drive away, because I was freaking out so much, I had to get this fixed because I was cocky and believed, hey, I've updated this, I've done my final proofread, I don't need to do another proofread of what I've just uploaded, which was the mistake because the manuscript that I had, while it was corrected, had also shifted slightly. Some of the POV chapter titles were on the wrong pages because I'd removed one of the chapters and combined it with the previous one, which led to some things kind of going weird within the manuscript, but I didn't check it, which is something I should have done. So, to recap, get reviewers. I'll go into a bit more detail there, but I'll go into the detail here. Go to Goodreads. Find people who've got similar books to you. Find people who've given them reviews. See if they have a Bookstagram or a BookTok or BookTube. Find people on BookTube, BookTok, and Bookstagram. Ask if they would like to receive a free copy for an honest review of your book. And that's how you get reviewers, which is exactly what I've done this time around. I've gotten a bunch of ARC reviewers who have also been reviewing the first book because I've given them both the first and second book for free so they can review them. So it both boosts the first book and the second book. And yeah, so I've done it this time, but again, kind of a year too late. And yeah, that's how you get reviewers. It's also a good way if you're reaching out to people who are under 10,000 followers. They are more often than not going to say, yes, I would love that, because they are getting the recognition for their work. They are also more often than not going to be the ones who are reached out to by traditional publishers. So it just means that they are kind of getting attention and you're giving validation to their work, as well as the fact that they are then going to validate your books because they are going to be reviewing them, even if they hate it. A review is a review. That is how you need to think about it. Hated it or love it, the review is a review. Where was I going with this? Yeah, so what you want is you need to get reviewers, you need to know your audience, you need to not be cocky and double check everything, and just in general, figure out your marketing plan. Have a marketing plan of what you want to do, how you want to do it, and where you're going to do it. What platforms are you going to use? That is a big thing. And then hopefully that'll work in your advantage and you will be able to gain some sales from doing these things. But let's go into the last thing now, which is what to do to find at least some success, or at least try to work towards some success. Reader magnets. Now, this is not something that everyone has to do. It is something that was actually recommended to me by Antoine Bandley, who is a friend and fellow author of mine. And it's basically you writing a short story, introduction, or supplementary material ahead of the release of a novel, which you either sell for 99p or just completely free. And it's, like I said, it's an introduction to the world that you're doing. It's something that gives people a little, in a sense, flavor text to what you are going to be producing and what is going to be coming out, as well as the fact that it is a way for readers to read something for free or for very cheap to get an idea of you as an author. They'll read these stories and be like, oh, hey, I actually enjoyed the way this person wrote prose. Oh, hey, I actually enjoyed the way this person presented their characters. I'm intrigued now as to what they're going to be doing next, especially if you put at the end what your cover is and what your first novel is, and like, oh, this is actually connected to this series, be sure to pre-order now, blah, 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 blah. Doing things like that helps gain the attention from readers who may not previously know of you because you are a new author, and it gives them interest in your abilities without having to spend £9 on a novel or £4 or £5 on an ebook, because sometimes people just don't want to spend money if they don't actually know if they're going to enjoy your work. So sometimes it's just worth doing something for free and cheap to get attention from readers. And it does work. I've done it for both Into the Wild now and also for my Eileen in the Other World series, which is with Bandley Books. So that was Echoes of the Past for Into the Wild and The Green Man Falls for Eileen in the Other World. And what I've then also done afterwards, also inspired from Antoine Bandley, is doing short stories in between those releases, or like follow-ups to those novels. So I also had Before I Go, which is set between Way of the Wild and Home to the Wild. And I'll be doing the same again for the book, for the short story after Way of the Wild, as well as like a little follow-up. And sometimes that just helps with people continuing to know your name, because you are releasing things between these big novels of, you release one novel and one short story a year sort of thing. And it keeps people aware of your name because you are not disappearing for a year before releasing something else. Obviously, that is something people can do and it does still work, but releasing something maybe like every 6 months does help a little bit more that people do not forget your existence, which, considering how many books come out a year, sometimes it just helps to kind of have an additional advantage. Rapid releasing is also something that does happen a lot in self-publishing, though there are definitely authors in traditional publishing who do something similar, like Brandon Sanderson, Rick Riordan. There is someone else, but I've completely forgotten her name. But yes, rapid releasing is definitely more common within the self-publishing sphere, but it does happen in traditional publishing. There's like someone that I know of who released like a book every other month for a year. So they released 6, I think they were novellas, so I don't know if they were full novels, but they released 6 books in a year. And it got people's attention. I believe they were all connected to the same series, or they may have all been standalones within the same connected universe. I can't remember 100%. I apologize for not doing that research before doing this. But there is a lot of rapid releasing that does happen. There is also the case that sometimes people just release like 3 things a year, which is still a lot of material. And again, similar to the reader magnets, it gives people more attention to your name because you are releasing things quite regularly. They don't always have to be from the same universe. They don't always have to be similar genres. You're just releasing things regularly enough that people kind of like, oh, this person that I remember reading something about has released something else. I may be interested in that. Or if they've read one series of yours and they see that you've released something else, they could be interested in reading that as well. Either way, by continuously producing content, you are gaining interest from your readers, which definitely helps in terms of sales. Though again, of course, with self-publishing, you will be spending money towards these rapid releases, and hopefully by doing these sort of marketing ploy-based things, you're able to make that money back. But again, always the risk with that. But rapid releasing isn't for everyone. My burnout ability would definitely not allow me to do rapid releasing, but it's definitely something I would be considering in future if I ever had the time for it. Writing to market and trends. Now, this is definitely something that does happen in traditional marketing, but it also does happen a lot more in self-publishing, or at least in my opinion, because in self-publishing, the amount of networking that happens within self-publishing is something I definitely did not expect. I kind of expected self-publishing to be almost a completely solitary thing, but I have made so many more author friends when becoming a self-published author than I had prior to that. And by being friends with self-published authors, I have gained so much more information about the market than I ever had beforehand. Like what's more interesting and what's kind of gaining more interest in general from readers on TikTok, like what videos and video styles are picking up interest, what books are hitting bestseller lists, what books are kind of gaining more attention as the years have gone by. There's definitely a more on the field approach within self-publishing because you need to be a lot closer to your audience to actually know and reach them to be able to sell your books. You've got to be, it's the way I would like to describe it, which sounds really weird, is the people who it's a really bad comparison. Like at like local schools and stuff like that, they open on the weekends so people can go in and have a coffee and catch up with like the neighborhood and stuff like that. It's like being the person who goes to that to network with everyone and talk with everyone, to find the local gossip, to find what's on everyone's mind, to find what people are complaining about at that point in time, just to gain all this little information and take that information for yourself and figure out how you can use that to your advantage. That's kind of how I think about writing to market and trends within self-publishing. You are getting into that field and hearing what is going on and then using that information to write to that audience, which then leads to that audience appreciating you because you are listening to what they are asking for. And honestly, it also, in my opinion, leads to self-publishing kind of sometimes being ahead of these trends because we are on the floor with those readers, and sometimes we're also those readers ourselves. I mean, I'm about to start writing a Be Gay, Do Crimes romance series because I know that that's something a lot of people are really interested in at the moment. And also, that phrase has been around for ages. I can't believe that maybe it has happened before. Maybe I need to do more research. But it's something that I have seen on TikTok, people being interested in these sort of spicier, sapphic stories. And it's in being aware of those trends that authors in self-publishing are able to write to that market. And it's leading to more people reading self-published works. I mean, there are entire blogs and Instagram pages that talk about indie and self-published books, which is amazing in and of itself. I mean, there's also like Daniel Green here on YouTube, who's now got sections at the end of his videos. I think it's only in fantasy news, but I could be wrong, where he shouts out self-published authors and self-published books, because obviously he himself is a self-published author. And so there are just more things that are of advantage to self-published authors. Again, there's still obviously more benefits of being a traditional published author. I'm not going to lie about that. Being traditionally published is something that a lot of self-published authors are probably only aspiring to, or at least the majority. They're obviously the small minority who don't even need to consider traditional publishing because they are doing incredibly well as is. But even with all of this, self-publishing has become something that is more of interest to authors and writers as the years have gone by because of the various different things that I have talked about during this lecture. As time moves on and more people recognize and respect self-publishing, I think it's definitely going to be an area that may eventually become on par with gaining the same level of respect and recognition that traditionally published authors and traditionally published books get. And I personally, as a self-published author, cannot wait for that day. Thank you all so much for tuning into this lecture of mine that hopefully was informative, was interesting, and you all enjoyed to some degree. If you didn't, you can rate your professor in the comments by letting me know that you hated it. If you are an author who is self-published or someone who is traditionally published, or you just want to give your thoughts on this conversation in general, let me know in the comments down below, as well as Tell me about your stories. Tell me about your ideas. Let me know if you are self-published or even traditionally your marketing ideas. Tell me everything. I want to hear what you all have to say. And yeah, let me know. Would you want me to be your professor in future? Do you think I could pull off the professor look? I know I'm not wearing a suit, but I did buy a suit to look like a professor. I just didn't want to wear it today because I didn't want to look too much like an asshole. So, yes, thank you all so much for joining Professor Fran's Self Publishing 101 class. And yes, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, all that sort of fun stuff. Check out my books if you do want to support me, linked in the description box. And have a great day, and I'll see you all next time.